So welcome everybody. I guess the first thing I want to do is welcome our guest, who is our speaker, Deborah Brown. And it is a topic that I know we are all interested in. And it will be good to get an update on what is happening with affordable housing here in Brookline. We all have seen lots and lots of development going up around Brookline. You can't miss it. Maybe Deborah will talk a bit about how that is going to impact on our affordable housing. But Roger,
yes.
I pass the baton to you.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting Deborah and myself. I'd like to point out that oftentimes we're confused with the Brookline Housing Authority. And I noticed in your listing on your website, it mentioned that Deborah of the BHA, the Brookline Housing Authority, was going to be a speaker. This does happen because we're both organizations are interested in the same subject matter, which is affordable housing. And I'm glad to be able to, have some information about BIC. I have been on the board of BIC since 2007, so I'm in my 14th year. And I've been president for the past 7 years. And I don't think I'm going to be continuing much longer beyond my current term. We have a really terrific board. Deborah is our vice president. We have representatives. We have affordable tenants from the Egmont Street property owned by the BHA. We have professional people who are employed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, real estate brokers, bankers, accountants. It's a very, very diverse group in many respects. We're 40 years old. We were created in 1980 by the town of Brookline, by the way. We own real estate, 2 properties in Brookline. One is 1017 Beacon Street, which is managed by the Pine Street Inn for us. The other property is and there are 16 single room occupancies in that building at 1017. It's named after Sarah Wallace. I don't know how many of you remember Sarah Wallace. She was a very special attorney in Brookline, special counsel for getting money out of Washington, D.C. Nobody could do that better than Sarah. Her work is all over Brookline. So this is where we are today. We're about to celebrate our 41st anniversary in May, where we have the other property is a 6-family on Boylston Street, which Elias visited recently with Deborah. So let me tell you about Deborah. First of all, Deborah called me one day and she said, can you tell me something about the Brookline Improvement Coalition? And I did, and she said, well, I'm interested in affordable housing. And I said, well, how would you like to be a member of our board? And she readily accepted. And she has really been a major force in putting a structure to our organization and bringing about some great ideas about asset management, which essentially are 2 real estate properties. We've had other real estate properties as well, but these are the two properties that we now own. Deborah is an attorney. She graduated from the University of Texas Law School, and she was employed for a career with the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And she had many different levels of management responsibilities for the EPA. And luckily for us, she moved to Brookline. And so she's been a very important member of the board, and has directed us to have a strategic plan, which she's going to talk about today with you. And it's my pleasure, believe me, to introduce Deborah. I don't think we would have succeeded with a lot of current directions if it were not for Deborah. So Deborah, I'm happy that you're here, and Deborah will be speaking with other groups throughout the town as well. So all yours, Deborah.
Thank you, Roger. I very quickly, I want to talk a little bit about Roger. There's a concept of leadership, and it's about setting a direction and a tone. And one of the things that I have been incredibly appreciative of about Roger is the way he leads. And it's we don't always agree, but one of the things that Roger has taught me is that you don't have to. What you do have to do is listen. And you have to be kind and generous. And it's a lesson that he reinforces every time I talk to him. And anybody that you all are on a not-for-profit board, you know how important that is. And so I may not say it enough to you, Roger, but thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Brookline's a richer community because of Roger. You too, Roberta. So I felt it really important to make that part of my comments, because it comes from two places with me. That intellectual side of me and my heart, and I'm just very grateful, to talk to Roger on a regular basis. Now that we're both vaccinated, popping in almost unannounced. So, but Roger gave you a little background on BIC, and as the town's only community development corporation, we took on the responsibility for making sure that this town has as much affordable housing as humanly possible. And that's an uphill battle in this town because land is so expensive. And the other thing is, people may say they want affordable housing, but it's hard to own sometimes what that means. And as we have talked about our strategic plan and thought about what BIC can be doing going forward to support affordable housing, we went through and we did our little visioning exercise. We formed a committee of 4 people, and we met every Wednesday for almost 9 months. I think this is the 10th community presentation that we will have made, and we will make many more. We have gotten people talking about affordable housing in this town in ways that has never happened in the past. But I'm old enough to know that talk is cheap if you don't have a plan. It doesn't mean a thing if you don't have a plan. And so we began with Well, let's think about our vision. And so we wrote a vision that not only focused on, making sure that people have housing, but we also talk about what happens when people have quality, stable housing. They're able to do so much more. Uh, Here's a quick digression. A couple of months ago, we got a call from our property management company. Says, you know what, these people just moved in. They don't have clothes. They don't have furniture. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so we mobilized. We mobilized the community. And this woman, single parent, is almost just in a state of stasis. Just barely able to move because she's got so much going on around her. Well, they moved into 154 Beacon. And yesterday I was over at the property and I saw the kids for the first time. And what were they doing? They were playing. They were laughing and they were happy. And I started crying because I knew 2 months ago they were in a bus station. So that's part of the census we serve. Another part of the census are people who I like to refer to them as the people that time and God forgot. And that's those people with mental illnesses. And when we think about the Beacon Street property, I was over there the other day. It's that little engine that could, but it's that little engine that could with, 50, 60, 60-year-old people. And they're trying. But if we don't provide them with housing, well, like the woman that was in the bus station, who knows what would have happened to her? She certainly wouldn't have gotten into BHA property because there's like a 7-8 year list just to get on the list. And so, we're trying to create opportunities where there are no opportunities. We're part of spreading the word is to get people to think about these are our neighbors. These are not abstractions. These are real people that, I always say, but for the grace of God, there go I. Because all it takes is somebody to hit me in the head with a brick and my life is over. And that may be what happens to some people: drug addiction, loss of a job, spousal abuse. I mean, that's a fair number of the families, even at BHA property. When you look at the families, that's how they got there, because they were fleeing spousal abuse. But I want to get back to our strategic plan. But I did want to plant the seed as to why we do what we do and why we have this passion. We came up with a mission statement. We came up with some core values. Diversity is one of our core values. Whether you're talking about the board, whether you're talking about people who live in our properties, for that matter, how we engage with people, just making sure that we reach out to as broad and a diverse a population as we can reach. And that means the uber rich, and that means the near destitute. The other thing that we did is we also began to think about, what are some of the, what do we need to do that's different from the way other people talk about planning? And we said, we're going to be specific. We're going to identify goals that we can measure, that are achievable, that are realistic, and that we can get within a discrete period of time. They call them SMART goals. And, I am a staunch believer in if you don't set a goal, then you're not going to get anywhere. My experience is that it doesn't happen. And so part of what we started doing is we started talking externally, we talked internally, and we started thinking about, well, how do we make BIC a success? And so, you know, you got to think about your priorities. Well, guess what the first priority was? Community engagement. And that's partly what this is. If you don't talk to people, if you don't understand what their issues are, what their needs are, you know, how are we to flourish? For that matter, you know, it's like we gave a presentation at the Housing Advisory Board, and they handle, you know, millions of dollars. They are sort of a financial conduit for affordable housing dollars. And they've been generous with us in the past. But, you know, it's one of those relationships that can't be stops and starts. It's something that has to be consistent. And so to have those conversations with them and the people on their board who represent planning, who represent uh, all manner of different organizations in town, you know, there was a real value. And so we're having the conversations, and sometimes people push back and they'll say, well, where have you been? You've been around for 40 years. Why haven't you done more? And, you know, part of the response is, and that's why we're here now. That's why we're here now, to start the conversation, to continue the conversation, because it never ends. Like we have a good final draft of our strategic plan. But the reality is, probably by the end of summer, having had some conversations with additional people, uh, we're going to revise it. Because like I described with Roger, you know, he's teaching me to listen. And that's how we're going to be successful. So community engagement is our first, second, and third most important goal that we have. We want to increase the board. We want to increase the diversity of the board. We want to give the community as many opportunities as possible to describe what their needs are. We're working on designing a volunteer program to help meet some of BIC's needs. We're also, as we look at community engagement, we want to get our low-income residents to feel empowered. And that is one of our goals, to empower the most low-income residents in this town to be solid advocates for affordable housing. One of the other things that we've worked on is our asset management. You know, it's like you own your house. If you don't do maintenance, your house is going to deteriorate. Well, we just found out we received a $58,000 grant from the town. We're going to be replacing our roof. But, you know, Elias will tell you that we need to repair our siding. Elias will tell you that when you go to 154, 156 Boylston, we need a play area for our kids. We don't have a play area. And Roger and I are happy to take you over. The units themselves are in great condition. But as I was telling someone one day, we can't expect people to live in those units only. And so, you know, Elias and I were talking about, how do we beautify this backyard? How do we make it inviting so it's a place where families will go out and play? Can we put in a small community garden because one of the residents loves to garden? So, you know, it's that kind of visioning that actually falls under asset management. It improves the quality of our properties. There are, some soundproofing issues that we need to deal with at another property. And making sure that we can pay our bills. That's another important piece of asset management. You know, we've got some notes coming due, but making sure that all of that is soundly in place, and those conversations again are taking place when we have goals. Internal systems. You know, and I've partly been talking about that, and that's the strength of the organization. One of the things that a few of the things that we've been working on is, you know, in addition to making sure that we're financially and fiscally strong, but also, you know, making sure that we have strong accounting systems in place. Uh, Poor Roger spent, I think, a chunk of his weekend working on centralizing and scanning records, monitoring compliance with our own internal policies and procedures. And, we're going through our first recertification as a community development corporation, and that's in the final stages. Lastly, we need to be able, we need to be able to play with the big kids. And one of the ways to do that is to get an additional certification. And so we've started developing the paperwork for that certification. And what that allows us to do is to qualify for tax credits. And that's how most affordable housing in this country is financed these days. That's how BHA pays for all of its properties. That's what most of the CDCs in Massachusetts do, and there are state low-income tax credits, which are very competitive. And there are federal low-income tax credits that are also competitive. Now, I will say that the town has $34 million coming in as part of most recent COVID relief bill, and I will be interested to see how they set up some priorities. And of course, Roger and I have joked about how we need to make clear that we need the funds to continue our affordable housing. So, that's our internal controls piece. Let's just make sure that our house is in as much a sound order as possible. The other piece is fundraising. If we don't have money, guess what? We're not going to do a whole heck of a lot. And so, we've developed a fundraising plan, a fundraising strategy that sort of dovetails on our internal controls and internal systems. The last piece is deals actually with affordable housing. Now, I think Roger sometimes shakes his head when I say this because I'm also a bit of a dreamer. But why can't we build 40 units in 4 years? Why can't we? 40 units in 4 years. We see private developers slap up houses, well, once they get through the permitting process, in 18 months. But if we don't set a goal, it won't happen. I believe it's eminently achievable. I'm softening Roger up so that I think even he's starting to believe that we can do it. So how does this happen? Again, it goes back to community engagement and people acknowledging that we don't have enough affordable housing. And so, and this was not BIC's doing, this is Deborah Brown's doing. I submitted 2 warrant articles this go round. And one of them calls for us to evaluate the Babcock parking lot for affordable housing. There's nothing around there. I mean, the businesses, we've got to figure out how to make sure they have adequate parking. But my goodness, why not? If we did 40 units, we'd do as much as we've done overall in probably the last 10 years. Why not? So the other property that I submitted a warrant article for the study is the Fisher Hill area, the west side of the Newberry College. Now, I'm not saying that's the end all. I'm saying we voted to study what was best on that site. And residents were clearly saying it was affordable housing. But guess what? No study committee has been formed. No study committee has been formed. So it's a shove. It's a little bit of a nudge. It's not a nudge. It's a shove saying for Fisher Hill, people voted for this. You said you would do it. Let's get started. But we know people need affordable housing. So part of any affordable housing is figuring out, what does it look like? What's the size? What's the scale? And again, you're going to hear me loop back around. If I had a Venn diagram, you'd see community engagement right in the middle of it, because it all starts with having real conversations. But it's thinking about the size and the scale of the housing and where it would be placed, whether we're talking about senior housing, mixed income housing, family housing, what kind of amenities would we have? And, this town doesn't do a lot of it, but what about mixed income? If you do mixed income, the secret to all of it is if you have some units that are market rate, then they can really subsidize the affordable end of things. If you think about using municipal properties, that's sometimes as much as 35% of the cost of construction. And so and then you get these tax credits, and you can begin to see how all of these pieces fall into place. And that's what our strategic planning is about, to create a roadmap for where we want to go and what it will look like. Now, I didn't mention one resource that will be on the ballot in a month, and that's the Community Preservation Act. And BIC is a sponsor for the Community Preservation Act. And I'm one of those people that's being a proponent. It's a 1% tax levy, and it will, if you pay $8,000 in taxes, we're talking about an $80 bump because it's 1%. It's 1%. We're not, we're talking about using our collective will and our collective good to create money and not leave money on the table, because we're getting taxed one way or the other. And that money will stay in Brookline. Plus, there's a 30% match at the state level. And all this money puts us in a better position to qualify for federal money. It's all about a leveraging game. And so it's not only affordable housing, but it's historic preservation sites. So I've seen where some churches in the center of town that don't have money, their facades need to be helped, that have been helped. It's for recreation, and it's for green space. And again, when I look at a place like Fisher Hill, imagine, a soccer field out there next to the, mixed income housing, next to, dare I dream, a senior citizen satellite. I say, why not? But that is what we at BIC are doing. We're this visioning, this work it's not so easy, and it's not for the faint of heart, but we're excited about it. We need as many partners as we can get. And Rotary, this is easily within your wheelhouse, and, your commitment to service. And so I just, I want to say, thank you for allowing me to describe where we're headed, what we want to do, and how we plan on getting there. So if you have any questions, Roger and I are ready. Elias?
Thank you. Yes, I do want to thank you very much for coming here and talking to us today. You really enriched our knowledge of what's going on with affordable housing in Brookline. And I must tell you that I was one of the attendees of a meeting the other day where your Warren article was discussed on Coolidge Corner. And it's beautiful. We need people like you to come up with and I agree with you. You must have a plan, and you certainly do. You do have a plan. And this is one. The second one, yes, as was discussed earlier, my term next year as president of this club, and I do like to have my a project in one of your properties, and most likely on Route 9, like the other day we discussed, you and I. So we'll go forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Deborah, thank you, really. I hate to say it, but I'm still confused. Do you guys compete? First of all, I apologize for saying it's BHA and not BIC. That was my error. But can you tell me how you guys, what is your relationship with BHA? You mentioned $34 million coming back to the town. Do you then compete with BHA for some of those funds for affordable housing?
No, we don't. Actually, the money, the rent money is filtered through the BHA. We get, for example, with the Pine Street Inn, the funds for the rent, and Pine Street Inn is our property management company. Those funds come through the BHA to us. They write a check out to us, and we write a check for the same amount payable to the Pine Street Inn and send it to them. And that's how that works. The other property, 154, 156 Boylston Street, which Elias visited with Deborah not too long ago. Those are all Section 8 tenants. That property, we received a mortgage from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. And one of the requirements for an affordable housing unit is 80% of the median area. And so that's an 80% property, but this is all just a simplification of this, but we definitely don't compete. The BHA is a very important public housing agency. We're a nonprofit corporation, and we have different properties that we own. I hope that answers your question. Deborah, you
Laura?
can add anything.
Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah. One of the ways that other towns, and I think we are one of them, are looking at addressing affordable housing is looking at our zoning laws to see how we might expand them and change them to make more multifamily housing available, because part of the whole issue about racial equality, racial equity is that when you have single family homes as the dominant type of home, you cut a lot of people out from being able to, and many of those zoning laws in favor of single family homes were put there to keep people of color out. And so what do you think about this, looking at zoning laws? I'm sure you could see where I'm coming from, but what do you think about this, looking at zoning laws to see how we can expand them to have more multifamily housing?
You know, it's interesting. It's, it is, I don't want to call it this. Well, I think race is the third rail in any conversation we have in this country.
Mhm.
I think that Brookline is heavily invested in its zoning, but I see that, the governor signed a bill that sort of changed the percentage of votes that you need to change zoning. It went from, I think, what was it, Roger, 2/3 to 51?
It allows the communities to vote changes in the zoning bylaw by a majority vote, as opposed to 2/3, which is now the current requirement in Brookline.
And see, one of the reasons I looked at Babcock because I thought it would be easier to make the argument that, whatever zoning changes that need to take place would not create a hardship for the neighbors.
Mhm.
So, I'm acutely aware of it. I mean, I have not personally tried to tackle it because I honestly don't have the bandwidth. But I know that groups like Brookline for Everyone introduced a warrant article last year to actually begin to look at, comprehensive zoning reform. Roger Blood has talked about the need for significant zoning reform. I mean, I think it's something that our leadership has to push, that people have to just say, we're fed up with this. But I will also tell you, I saw an email yesterday of a group that is calling itself,
Brookline
pardon me?
by design.
Yeah, by
Brookline
design.
by design.
And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, if I showed this in the light of day to a stranger, they would say, oh, these people are just trying to perpetuate the status quo here.
Mhm.
And I don't think they believe that. I don't think they believe that. But I think you're right. We've got to undertake some serious zoning reform. And in a town form of government, that's warrant articles. But I'm sure people started showing up at select board meetings and saying, what gives with the zoning process that we have in town, that it undermines not only affordable housing, but it undermines sustainability. It undermines green infrastructure, climate resiliency. There are all kinds of things that our zoning just reinforces. And and I was telling somebody earlier this morning that when I think about those issues, everybody thinks about the environment. Well, guess who the center of the environment is in my world? Living, breathing organisms. So it's not only trees, but it's people. And
Thank you.
so,
Thank you.
Bill, did you have a question? I think we have time for one more.
Phil, you're muted.
I was wondering where you got the money to buy the properties you already have and where the money will come from to buy the next property or build the next property.
From various sources. We have received funding from the town of Brookline through the Housing Advisory Board, Massachusetts Housing Partnership. Currently, 1017 Beacon Street, we refinanced in 2017 with the Brookline Bank. And the funding sources, if you go way back to many years ago when we first started, there were various sources, government sources, federal grants, HUD. We were at one time called a community housing organization, or known as a CHODO. And HUD was very generous with us and provided a lot of funds. We, at one point, as an example, we purchased 2 studio condominiums at 1600 Beacon Street. If you know that building near Washington Square. And so we purchased those 2 units with funding from HAB. And then we sold them at affordable, special affordable prices to qualified individuals. So that's one example of how that works. So we didn't spend any of our own money, actually. Other times, the town of Brookline has asked us to prevent foreclosure on affordable condominium units where the owners are in default. And they ask us to go to the bank's auction and bid on the units and then turn around and sell them to qualified affordable families. So there's a whole variety of ways in which we participate with banks and all sorts of programs out there that are interested in affordable housing.
We've hit 1 o'clock. I know many of you have to go. Some have had to leave already. Deborah, Roger, can you stick around if somebody has questions? Another question?
Sure, I can. Yeah.
I think we can all agree this was very, very informative. Something that we are all committed to and interested in for Brookline. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
And Deborah, I need to talk to you offline about a couple of things, so I'll get back to you.
All right.
I want to say hello to my old buddy there, Jake Walters. Hi, Jake. Jake had represented years ago, I think even before I got on the board, I think you represented BIC.
A couple of things, yeah, I did.
Yeah, various real estate matters, yeah.
Yeah.
Great to see you, Roger. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your work in the town. I know that you do a great deal for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you. 40 units, 4 years.
I agree.
Yeah.
Love it.
Communication. I think many of us who are at the meeting today knew either nothing or terribly little about BIC and the work and the people and what's going on. You know, the mind flies immediately to BHA when the term affordable housing comes up, and that's not the only show in town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.